Right.
We're interviewing Tim and Tami Genry from Alabama, and they work with the Landmark Church of Christ, but a church plant of the Landmark Church of Christ. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. And y'all are actually in Birmingham, right?
That's right.
Tell me a little bit about the church plant, because obviously that puts you on a little different context than a lot of the other churches that are already have buildings, already have all these things in place, which may have turned out to be more of a hindrance during this than a blessing. But tell me a little bit about what you guys do and how you do it before, how your normal procedures are, and then kind of what happened over the course of these last 6 months. So just fill all those blanks in.
Yeah, as a church, we met in a rented facility at our library, local library.
Wait, stop.
Yep.
I forgot one thing. When you guys start talking, I'm going to flip over to the speaker view, so just y'all will be on the screen. And I forgot to do that, so I apologize. So same question, but I'm going to flip back over to speaker view, and that way, so when I ask a question, give me like a split second to switch views, and then and then you can start answering. So same question, beginning to how that transitioned, and what that's looked like over the last 6 months. So go ahead.
We started originally meeting in home when we were first planted, and then we moved into a rented facility, library reception room or meeting room. And so we had a worship leader, and our sermons were piped in from the Montgomery campus. And so the thing we innovated at our church locally for us was changing our Bible class time to discovery Bible studies. And that played a key role when this hit, which we can talk about later. But our big thing was locally was, our local outreach and then our Bible study time, Bible class time. So
how did they, we'll just go right into that. How did the Bible studies work? And especially people not familiar with Discovery Bible Study, obviously that's we've done that at a church where I've been, and so I'm familiar with it. But for those that aren't, what exactly does that look like, and how did that fit into y'all's reaction and response to the pandemic itself?
Yeah, for us, we were interested in Discovery Bible Studies after trying to. We had two problems. Number one, we wanted to learn how to make disciples. That was something that none of us felt we were prepared for, and it was not in our wheelhouse or our strength at the time. So that was a big reason we moved to Discovery Bible Studies. The other reason was being I don't want to say a metrics guy, but looking at our attendance for Bible class in general and just having a lecture style class, those numbers were basically horrendous. So we started looking into churches that were successful in not only in bringing people in attendance wise, but also in transforming their members into being disciple makers. So we went to a few workshops on it and read a lot of books, and we decided on Discovery Bible Study because it was so successful. And basically, Discovery Bible Study tries to move people from knowledge-based to action-based studies, and which was exciting to us. And the format was and it's so simple and replicable that anybody can do it. And it's you no longer have the traditional lecturer up front. Instead, the goal is to let the Holy Spirit work and do His work and teach through His Word. So we, we ask a question at the beginning. We want to know, what are you dealing with that you're really thankful for this week, or what's giving you energy this week? And then what's been your energy stealers this week? What's stolen energy from you, or the struggles you're dealing with this week? And we take time and we pray for those things. And then the focus is finding, there's a story for each week from the Word, and it's not to hear that story, but to be able to learn to tell it. So we would read it and then learn as a group to tell the story without having to look at the passage, but to tell it just from, summarize it without leaving important information out or adding to it. But then, we just ask the questions. The standard discovery questions are: what does this tell you about God? What does this tell you about humanity? And then, if this is from God, what will you do with this week? What will you do as a result of learning this lesson? So, and that's been a pivotal question, and it's been life-changing, I think, for our church. Our attendance went from, I hate to say it, but around 20% for Bible class an adult to 100% within the first week. And it has stayed in the 90s to 100%. And I'm talking about the people who came to Bible class versus worship. So
let me ask you, you talking about the Discovery Bible Study, and how does that fit with with Zoom? I know y'all had to go to Zoom classes, and so in some ways, lecture format is easier for Zoom. If everyone's sitting there, they've got their cameras or their microphones muted, and they're just standing there and they're just nodding heads along the way. How does Discovery Bible Study fit into a more dynamic Zoom type environment? And were there struggles with that as far as having multiple people trying to participate in a Discovery Bible Study that's much more interactive than a normal Bible study?
You want to go first?
Yeah, it actually worked to our benefit a great deal, because had we just been watching the sermons that we typically have by video, there would have been no personal interaction with our members. And so by doing it what we did through Zoom is Tim has trained other people to facilitate those Discovery Bible studies. And so we would do parts of our worship time as a whole group, but then when we would start our lessons, he would divide people into different rooms, and he had a leader in each room, and we would do our whole Discovery Bible study with a small group where everybody was participating and sharing, and it provided a way to have connection with our people. And it was very, conversational and back and forth and that kind of thing. And so it really ended up being a special time.
Yeah, you're the first people I've heard that have taken advantage of the breakout rooms in Zoom. We may be using some of those if they're in the webinar, in fact, but it is a great avenue and a resource just to be there together and then say, okay, now you're assigned to a room to be able to do that and have that kind of dialogue. And I guess the training of leaders is important to make that work, but also it's part of y'all's mission, right? Y'all are, as you said, disciple-making churches, and part of discipleship is being able to make other disciples. Do you think that this has helped y'all, maybe forced or helped y'all along in bringing more people into those disciple-making roles?
I think so. I think this whole pandemic pushed us. We could no longer wait for anyone to say, okay, I think I'm ready. We just had to be ready and go. Because we did Zoom immediately. That first week we shut down, we didn't skip a week. We went straight to Zoom. And for us, although it's not ideal because you're not getting that face-to-face contact, I was very familiar with it because a lot of the groups I work with use Zoom, and we use the breakout rooms over time. So that really made me familiar with it, and it allowed us to move, like you were saying, leadership had to rise to the top. People had to accept responsibility, and they found how simple it was to replicate.
It's funny because we read in the Bible about how the dispersion, the diaspora, created movement for the church, that spontaneous expansion, and it was very physical expansion, if you will, and yet Zoom, the pandemic has created kind of a digital diaspora. There you go. Say the word correctly, depending on who you are. But and that's what you're saying, is that's what it created that opportunity for y'all in the same way it did for the church in the first century. So just digitally instead.
Yeah, what was interesting is we heard of churches losing people to watch, this worship service at another church, or to watch maybe this big mega church's service or whatever, and we didn't have any of that. This format allowed us to engage with our people, and our people to feel connected through this whole time. We didn't. Every week actually our attendance rose because the people that were out of town connected and were on there. So yeah,
that's true, because y'all didn't have to. You move people right into that connected environment, and so no one had to miss out on anything. I think that's really neat. And one of our other churches we're talking to here in Texas was talking about that need to keep that connection going. I guess that really everyone has talked about that, and y'all just transitioned into that, like you said, immediately. Now, I do have a question though, because I thought about what you just said, and y'all made the decision to stop piping in the sermon and to go immediately to the Zoom. And it sounds like that decision was made very quickly. I guess two questions. Why make that decision? And I think you've kind of already addressed that. Why make that decision? And then how did that discussion go with the leadership at Landmark when y'all said, hey, I think this is going to be better for us if we do it this way? So how did that whole process go with the leadership both there locally and back in Montgomery?
Okay, your first question again was what was
how did y'all make that
the
decision?
First question?
The first one is why did y'all make that decision to go from bringing, piping in the speaker to this small group? And then how did that discussion go with back at Landmark saying, hey, we think we're ready to move on, in a sense?
Well, I would say first, we're a very relational church, and we knew that if we went to just watching someone speak, that we would lose that quickly. And so, we just decided that would not work for us. We could not be, first of all, if our goal is to train disciple makers, there was no way for us to know if we were doing that, if it was just a piped in sermon and no face-to-face contact. And one of the most tremendous blessings of being a part of this church plant is the eldership at Landmark in Montgomery and the way they have treated us. Anything we have approached them with has not been a discussion about, well, let me show you a better way. It has been, how can we help you? And so we've never really had our meetings are not per se, well, let's get together and think about or discuss. They trust us to have done that work, and their immediate reaction has always been, what can we do to help? Mm-hmm. So that's been a healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So so anytime y'all have had any obstacles along the way, y'all have always been able to just go to them and immediately address it with them and get the support you needed. So that's good.
Yeah.
Were there obstacles though? Not with obviously the leadership, but just in trying to move this process along for y'all? They're getting it online, or getting people to switch to the groups, or anything that y'all encountered in that process, or did it go as smoothly as you had hoped it would be?
You want to answer first?
Sure. I think, there were some hiccups with technology, a couple of times, and a learning curve for the body. But people were so hungry for connection. They were they showed a lot of grace, and they were just so happy to be seeing each other's faces and connecting weekly when they couldn't connect in person. They were willing to lead a breakout room group. It reached the point where they were ready to not just see faces on a screen, but they were getting very hungry to connect in person. So that became we could feel the tension rising of, can't we just meet somewhere in person? But I guess that, to me, the biggest obstacles initially were just how to sing and how to handle the technology, and those teaching people to keep their microphone off until they're ready to speak. All those things were really our obstacles initially.
How did y'all handle singing? Did y'all try to, or did you give up on the Zoom lag? How did y'all handle that?
We
sang.
Yeah, we sang. We had our worship minister. It was, for him, it was a huge struggle, because for him, he could only hear himself. And, that's like, I don't know. I don't know how to compare that to anything. He struggled the most because of, this is his passion to lead singing. And, he could hear no one but himself, and it drove him crazy. For me, I didn't notice it because I was hearing me and him. But we were muted. So, matter of fact, one time I did not mute myself, and I got about 50 texts in a minute telling me, please mute, so no, nobody wanted to hear my voice over his, for sure. And then I agree with Tami. Our big struggle, our biggest struggle outside of technology, was our people were ready to get together. And, then balancing that with the CDC guidelines and, so that was, I was thinking through this whole process of, we often talk about leadership in the church. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to also talk about fellowship in the church. Not all decisions are easy. These are tough decisions you have to make. And, sometimes we have to follow even when the follow is not the thing we want to do. So that was tough.
I know that some of the others we've talked to have mentioned that same thing, that the church is filled with people with opinions and people with strong desires. And that has been, a couple of people have said that probably their biggest struggle was getting people together and saying, we know you're not used to this, but this is what we want to do, what we feel like we need to do, and having people, buy into that with some modicum of grace and love.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like y'all managed to do that fairly well. And so, have you seen any serendipity as a result of going online? Have y'all been able to reach more people than you were meeting in the library room, or have others been able to get people involved more because of this, or has it remained about the same? Well, you said it grew, so because other people have been able to join in, but how's that affected the church's outreach and evangelism through all of this, using the Zoom and that kind of stuff? Or has it had any impact on it?
I think, we had some people that could easily invite their neighbors. Like, we had a few instances of neighbors joining into our Zoom worship. that might not have felt comfortable coming to a building. And then some of, like what Tim was talking about, our own members who will go home to see parents or who are traveling. We've had several times where some of our members were on the road because of work, and they were actually on our Zoom worship while driving, and that kind of thing. But we did have people outside our regular body that joined in during the Zoom time. Yeah. They haven't stayed with us, on a regular basis, but we got to fellowship some with them and be an influence in those times.
Yeah, I was hoping that some of those people might stick and see the vision and come alongside us, but God uses us in different ways, and I think for us, the way He used us in this at this time was, there were people who visited their families, and their families really didn't have a connection at that time with church. Churches were still figuring out how can we do our worship services online. So we were a safe place for them to join in. And then, like Tami said, some people asked their neighbors, and their neighbors had the only spiritual guidance they had was a sermon that they didn't really, there was no face-to-face connection. So they were able to come, and join us, and we provided a safe place for them as well to not only hear the truth, but to talk through the truth. So that was good.
Do y'all think that you'll continue some aspects of using Zoom after all this is over, or y'all hope to bring everybody back in and go back to the small group nature that missional churches often are? So that's why it's kind of different for y'all. Y'all are already in a small group mindset. That's your DNA. So the Zoom which is probably why you were able to move so quickly, I guess, to the Zoom. It was just a different medium, yet with the same kind of mentality is, well, we can meet together in a small group here, or we do it online. So do y'all, as y'all transition back, what do y'all think it's going to look like? Or have y'all started transitioning back? And how is that going to look over the next few months, assuming things, well, who knows which direction things are going to go, but how are y'all handling the transition? What do y'all think that's going to look like as you continue forward?
Yeah, that's been a really exciting part of our journey. We transitioned back 6 weeks in. We started meeting at a park, and at that time we were very much, everybody had a face mask, and it was still a little uncomfortable with that. We didn't hug, but we at least got to see each other, and that was neat. And we still to this day worship in a pavilion next to beach volleyball courts, a track, and a giant field, and a park, and a very well-used park. And so the exciting part of that has been our singing has brought in visitors that, being outdoors and not having walls, that we could have never brought in any other way. As a matter of fact, we were just, before this, I was texting with the lady who just walked in, and she heard the singing, and she was timid. And when the singing's over, we break into our Discovery Bible study groups, and she was timid about joining, but she tried it and sat through it, and then she, just had a ton of questions trying to figure out who we were and why we were meeting like this. But she has still been a part. And last week she texted us and asked, how can I start giving to this church? So, that's just one success story. But, it's interesting because the beach volleyball court being right next door, they have really loud music, and it's no telling what kind of music's going to be going on. we get there. But every time when we get there, when we start setting up, they turn it down, and they've been very polite. Of course, we live in Alabama, so I guess maybe that helps. But you know, we've never had to ask them. People who are there, you know, we tell them we're going to worship, and they're welcome to stay. We've had a man stay and continue working on his for his job. You know, he stayed through our worship one time and just continued to work. But it's open air, nice stuff that never happens inside four walls of a building. Happens there. So.
One week we were out at the park, and there was a husband and wife sitting near the pavilion facing out towards an open field. And when we started singing, they turned their chairs around and moved closer, and then ultimately sat in one of our small group studies, and they just enjoyed it so much. And they said, "Thank you so much for inviting us into your group today." And they said they actually attended a local church, but they were showing their house that morning and had to be out of the house, and just a variety of things were happening. And so they happened to be at the park, and they joined us. And we've just had a lot of things happen like that. I've seen people running down the track and coming close to the pavilion we're in, and they'll start pointing up, you know, or raising their hands or something. And it's just been a kind of unexpected opportunity for outreach there. Yeah. We bring a big TV screen and set it up so we see the words to the songs, so we connect that. But everything, I mean, it's just sitting on a picnic table. Communion is set out on a picnic table. Everybody's in lawn chairs. It's just very natural out there, and we sing and study and take the Lord's Supper together.
Yeah, and so the last thing I would add is our big debate right now is, do we ever go back inside four walls? I mean, our people really have enjoyed it, and we're wondering, because it was hard. It was much harder to get people to come inside those four walls than it has been to say, "Hey, meet us at the park." So that's been neat.
In y'all's strategic plan that you had all laid out, where was meeting in park in that? Was that like, you know, 1 year down the road, 5 years down the road, or was this just a whole new invention that you all decided you had to do? I know the answer, right?
Yeah, we were forced. There was no plan. Well, we had we had not worshiped on a Sunday morning in the park, but we had done park outreach because there's parks close to where we were meeting before. But yeah, this was not in our plan. So
those are sometimes the best moments, right? When we don't have a plan and we're just going to have to make it happen. Yeah. So how did y'all? Obviously a lot of it was just spontaneous in the moment, but how did y'all communicate with members and maybe the community while all this was going on? Again, I know you're smaller missional church, but how did y'all get word out that what was going on, that maybe you're meeting at the park, that you're going to have these Zoom meetings? How did all that communication work during this time?
Yeah, I think for us, we're, you know, the Discovery Bible Studies really allow for a lot of talking and the flow of information. And it also increased our attendance to basically 100%. So that it was very easy to communicate face to face, even though it was through Zoom when we decided to transition. Yeah, and then we just use text. You can't use just one, right? So we have to use email and text, and we have through our landmark connection, where we have a constant contact format to email. Anything you want to add to that? Is there?
We use Instagram and Facebook, and would post things that way. Also Facebook Messenger. But being small, and I feel like one of our greatest strengths is our connections and our relationships. It's very natural for there to be a constant flow of communication by all those methods, and people are really tend to be responsive to it. So we're fortunate in that way. Yeah.
Do y'all, as we think about what's going on with the webinar and everything as well, trying to encourage churches to think about, what if this happens again? What if things don't change and we're going to have to continue doing this? I think I know the answer to this question, but would you say that Discovery Bible Study is a much more responsive style of Bible study? Is it more flexible, more able to adapt to sudden changes than our more traditional formats where everything is spelled out exactly and we have this order of worship and we have this process and that's how everything works? You think the Discovery Bible Study is a good tool to even now start thinking about saying, hey, if we start implementing something like this, that should something happen again, we'll already be ready to move forward or be able to respond quicker? Because y'all sound like y'all responded faster to this than anyone else I've talked to. Would y'all recommend that to people?
Absolutely. One thing that came to mind as you were asking that question was the lady that Tim spoke about earlier who visited and has stayed with us. And she jokingly says, I'm the one that never left. She visited and never left at the park. She told Tim that the big thing that was different, is that how she worded it, about Landmark, was that she had never been asked what to do with what she learned that day or what to do with what the teaching was that day. And so that was a big piece for the Discovery Bible Study, was a big game changer for her. I had another couple that has been visiting for about a month or so. And on the first Sunday, they said, this is exactly what we've needed. And then a couple weeks into it, they went out of town and were at a family wedding and things, and said they did that format with their family while they were home. It made such a difference for them. And so, and people say all the time, I'm learning more about the Bible than I've ever known, in my life. And so I think it's been a key factor for our group. And it allows people to be very transparent. There aren't a lot of superficial answers and that kind of thing. You're very enlightened by other people's responses when they have a takeaway from the story, or they see, they say something they learned in the story. You get so much insight from other people, but also the time of sharing of what are your energy stealers this week, or what was great this week. It continues to build those relationships. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of pressure on teachers when you just try to have traditional classes. There's a lot of pressure on teachers because you put a teacher in front of people and everybody has different opinions and styles they like. And, a teacher can prepare and just nobody connects. And they're like, I've put all this time and effort. And I think as those mega church preachers they're not a dime a dozen, and people that can hold your attention are so hard to find. That what we found with Discovery Bible Studies is it is so easily replicated. And what I learn when I lead one, which is not teaching one, I just ask the questions and really do a ton of listening. But I am the one who chooses the direction or the stories and the themes that we're going to be focusing on. And so I look at the stories ahead of time. I answer the questions ahead of time in my own mind. But what I hear on Sunday is life-changing. And it's so easy. You don't have to have a great teacher because nobody's teaching except the Bible. The Word is teaching the people. And it's interesting, when I teach on my own, I feel like I'm a decent teacher. I taught for 27 years before I went into ministry. And when I teach on my own, the Holy Spirit guides me into that scripture and finding things that help me with where I am. And I tend to teach those things. But when it's a group of 8 or 10 people talking about, when Jesus is meeting the woman at the well, how do I, what is this telling me about humanity? When I start hearing 8 people who are in 8 different stages of life or 10 different stages of life start discussing that, I'm just blown away. What I hear, people say, oh, I learn the most when I prepare to teach. Man, if you sit in there and listen to those, I would I would challenge you to learn that much in preparing to teach, because I really do. I mean, we take notes. So did I lose track of what that question was all about?
Well, you both hit something that I thought was really important, because again, said earlier, kind of during this time of disconnection, then what we wind up with is we need to provide a place for people to come back and connect. And it sounds like Discovery Bible Study lets people do that, whether they are connecting online or in person. The focus of the Discovery Bible Study is to help people be transparent, to be open and connecting together, building those relationships. And I think that is exactly what is the most important thing, especially during this time. And when people are feeling isolated and alone, this provides a great way to do it. And it does it around the Word of God. So it definitely needs to.
Hey, and one of the things I'd like to mention that I forgot to mention, what Tami was sharing about the lady that has stayed connected. And when she was telling me, she said the thing, I was really intrigued by what her answer would be, why she stayed with us, because she went to, it's either the largest or second largest church in America is right here in Birmingham. And that's where she attended. And they have all the bells and whistles, if you like the lighting, if you like dynamic preaching, if you like all of these things, they have it. And they don't do it average, they do it excellent, And so I was wondering, why did she stay? And the things she said just was interesting to me, because usually people tell me they stayed for relationship, but she said, the thing that kept her was, you always ask, what am I going to do with this week? What is my I will statement for the week? And I've never been challenged. I usually just hear the word, but I've never been challenged to really do it. And I just thought that was cool. That was a neat thing to hear.
That's why we preach the word, right? Or I was preaching this morning about, it's not the word if it's not filled with power, and if it's not calling you to action and accountability. There's got to be something in what we're doing, and I think that definitely capitalized on that. And like I said, it fits well where everyone is right now and what they're experiencing. They need that opportunity to share and to connect. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Those are kind of all the questions. Y'all have any other thoughts about what has been going on there? And like I said, transitioning back, sounds like y'all have already in the middle of that debate, whether you're going to stay at the park or not. If you stay at the park, Francis Chan, you will have Francis Chan's blessing. He's all about that. And he'll tell you which way he'd vote. But anything else that's happened in these last 6 months that y'all think would really stand out, or something you'd recommend, tell people, hey, if you're going to do this, this is a good time to do it, because everybody is at a certain point. Anything like that?
Go ahead, you go first.
I was just going to say, other things that have kind of paralleled what we're doing on Sundays is we have Women on Wednesday every other week at someone's house, and we've done those on our screened porch, and we've done those around the fire pit. And so we've just tried to find other ways to connect during this time. We've hosted families, as well as other people in our congregation have hosted families for just a meal and set it up in our yard, or our driveway. We've done things like that outside. And the I will statements have led to so many really amazing stories that would not have happened if you don't say, I will do X, Y, or Z this week. Chances are we all have good intentions, but following through, it's hard because life is busy. And, Tim has a story of he decided he was going to reach out to some of his past students that are incarcerated. And he now has an ongoing relationship with several that has come out of the I will statements. But there are a lot of stories within our body of things that have come out of that. So it's been really effective for us in practicing what the word says. So that's been neat.
Yeah, that's so true. I think I forgot that the I will statement is what prompted that. But I think as ministers, we want to lead people, and we want to lead them to doing what Jesus did, and that was a struggle in a place where you can't connect socially. And I think Satan was really attacking us in the fact that, okay, now what are you going to do? How are you going to reach people and show them the compassion of Christ? And that was a really good way for me to continue. There's two things that allowed me to continue personally to disciple others. One was started writing my former students in prison. Yeah, they got a lot of time on their hands. One guy is in for murder, and he's been there for 9 years, and I was his first letter. So here I was thinking there was no opportunities, and God was showing me a whole different way and a whole different group of people that I could communicate with. One guy, I'm actually starting a discovery Bible study just through the mail with him in prison. So that's been, God's still blessing us. The other thing is I was challenged through a coaching organization that I work with that coaches ministry people to come up with a prayer calendar to pray for, first off, believers. So I just wrote down 30 names of believers to connect with on a daily basis. I would connect with one each day, and then I would either pray with them over the phone or text them my prayer for them based on our conversation. So that helped me stay in the loop with what was going on with people. But really the neatest thing was, after doing that for about 12 months, they challenged me to start a second calendar where I'm now praying for non-believers. And that has opened up so many conversations to be able to, and I have so many because I was a PE teacher. I taught 1,000 students a year for 27 years, So for me to reach out and find 30 unbelievers was very easy. Sometimes I don't get a response, and I go ahead and text them a prayer anyway. And then I've had multiple students say, hey, I would like to start looking at faith and forming a relationship, maybe possibly with Jesus. So yeah, God opened up those doors, even in the space of you can't be face to face. And I think what Tami said, still so much of what Jesus did was around the table. And, if you can have an outdoor table and still have don't let Satan lie and whisper those lies in our ears that we can't do things. Just continue to pray. And I will say this, to wrap up, the most important thing, bar none, is and that Satan attacks the most is prayer. And our people myself, everyone, if he can get us to stop praying, or a lot of churches, well, that's really our weakness before this happened, right? And so if he can keep us from that, all these plans, this seminar, nothing really works, right?
Right.
And so I think that's our biggest challenge as ministry leaders and elders is how do we get our people? How do I pray? And then how do I get my people to pray? Because I think with that, God opens doors and opens our eyes to opportunities that we weren't seeing before. And that was very wordy, and I'm sorry.
That's right. It's critical. You're absolutely right. The prayer is it's where it all begins, and I really appreciate that thought. Also, the hospitality aspect. It's very easy for, like you said, to give up and say, "Well, we just can't do anything." But real prayer to prayer for insights, prayer for ways to do things different, and God wants it to happen. So it's just a matter of us being open to Him, and that's where prayer comes in. Is we're opening ourselves up to God and saying, "Okay, point me in a direction, God, do something." So I really like the emphasis on prayer, and I like the dinner around the table outside somewhere. So because why not, right? I mean, it's safe. It meets all of the CDC requirements, and most people, I don't know how y'all's weather is. We're having great weather in Texas to do that. If you do it late enough, you can have some really nice outdoor meal together, and it'll almost be nice weather. So
exactly.
So what part of Texas are you in?
I'm in Corpus Christi, so we don't get good weather very often. It's usually 100% humidity and 100 degrees. So we've been having 60-degree mornings and 90-degree afternoons, but by mid-afternoon or mid-evening, I should say, 6-7 o'clock, it's gotten really nice again. So we're finally moving into something close to a fall, I guess, and that's really pushing it. But we do stuff out. We're Texas. We can barbecue any day of the week and at any temperature, which is so weird. But the outdoor aspect, I think, is really important. And both y'all seem to really capitalize on that, both in the park and encouraging people to do it in their homes. And it's kind of like the park is modeling that, right? It's like, okay, if we can meet as a body in the park, you can certainly meet with a few people in your homes and or at your homes, not in your homes, but at your home. So I think things will change, and these good examples of how it can change and be very, very productive. I'll just throw this in there, this side note in fact, I'm gonna stop recording.